Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. Welcome to episode 129, Summer Reading Suggestions for 2023. I'm presenting this episode with a little bit of a caveat that while I'm suggesting these as reads, I haven't actually read them yet. These are 5 books that are on my summer reading list, and it made sense to me to give them to you when we're in the beginning of summer. So if you're getting a chance to look for a scholarly reading book and you want to see what I'm reading and why, I put it out there. These are not recommendations yet because I can't vouch for the content in these books, but I will say that I've been looking at most of these for a while. They come pretty highly recommended from other academic writers and people that are interested in some of the same topics that I'm interested in. And also, I tend to, for summer books, I tend to look at books on academic writing and scholarly productivity, since that's my research interest. That's why this podcast and my working with Defend, Publish, and Lead exists. But I also do look for books on bigger picture issues. So a while back, for example, I read Cal Newport's Deep Thinking because I wanted to see, what was all the hubbub about that book and could it help academic writers and so on. So I know that we have done other episodes on reading, and I will make sure that I link to those in the show notes so you can see some other book suggestions we've done. But for this one, I'm just going to share 5 that are books that I'm looking to read this summer. So they are up on the screen for those of you that are listening in audio only. And there's just 5 screenshots of the books, but I'll make sure I say the titles and also link to them in the show notes so you can check them out yourself. So slides are not essential for this episode, but for those of you on YouTube, you'll be able to see them. So the first one I'm interested in is a book it's called Published. It was published in 2020, and it's one about writing a first scientific journal article. Many of our clients for Defend, Publish, and Lead are coming to us needing to write one of these articles for the first time. So I know for sure this is one that I will be reading. It's pretty cheap. I can't remember what the price was. I think it was like around $13 the last time that I looked at it. It looks like it is here. But one of the things that appeals to me about this particular book is that it's written for somebody that is truly a novice, someone who has not written a scientific journal article before. And so I could see that this would be really helpful because it basically takes the writer through all the steps of the literature review and doing an experiment and visualizing data and then doing some peer review and all those different stages in there. I did take a peek at the table of contents for this one because for me, it's very telling if a book is going to be useful or not based on how well it's organized in the table of contents. That's not something everybody might say, but that's something that I say when I'm looking for this book on academic writing and reading, primarily because I do like a book that you can skip around in and go to the parts that you need. So one of the things that I tend not to do with our clients is to say, well, go read this book on XYZ, because reading that book might take them 3 months. And maybe if you're a busy academic writer, you don't have that time to waste. So I tend to like books on academic writing where there's at least the possibility that you could skip around and get what you need, but it also exists in a format that you could read the whole thing from start to finish and get a sense of a writing process. So based on what I'm looking at here, it does look like this book can do both things. So I have not read it yet, but it comes very highly reviewed. It's one that hasn't been around for a real long time. So it's just called Publish, and it's about writing your first scientific journal article. The second one, I've been really interested in looking at this one since I've heard it. I heard about an interview about it come out a while back. I can't remember if it was on NPR or something like that. But basically, it was this book on building things and how to determine if something is worth once it's built. So, I think this can apply to us in writing because so many writers will come to us and they'll say, well, I'm bored with my topic, or I'm not interested anymore in this project, but now I need to write about it for my dissertation, or this is going to be my 4th book and I'm really tired of working with, this specific focus. And so one of the things that this book does, according to its description, but also in the interview that I heard, what it does is basically sort through some deciding questions. How do you know what you're building is worth building? So this is one that I'm going to check out because it's talking about, it calls itself an unorthodox guide. It just looks like it's also written very well. So I'm also interested in kind of the quality of the writing. I do like stylish academic writing. I'm a big fan of Helen Sword's work. I'll put a link to her book in the show notes. And that's one that I sometimes will recommend to writers when they feel like their writing is just getting flat or isn't very interesting to read. There are some books that I will read because I need to power through and get the content. But a book like this, where I'm more interested in the idea, I do like it when it's well written and I can actually see some modeling of sentences and paragraphs and things like that to use with academic writers. So in this case, the paperback, at least in the US, it's listing here at like $12.49 on Amazon. So again, this one wouldn't be a real expensive one, but it is one that I'm going to check out. And I probably should have put this one first, because out of all the books I'm talking about right now, this is the one I'm most excited about. And I do tend to try to intersperse books that are practical advice guides about writing with ones that are maybe more big idea guides throughout the summer. So that way I can kind of keep them straight as I'm absorbing knowledge. But Build is going to be a second one that I'm looking at this summer. A third one that I like is not so much on the academic writing. It's a little bit more on project management, but it's also something I've been thinking about as we've been extending our training on the leadership side of Defend, Publish, and Lead for department chairs, for provosts, for different faculty support areas. We work with an awful lot of faculty developers who are in charge of supporting writing efforts for faculty at their universities or graduate students at their universities. And a message from all these spaces, and this is across from the US, it comes from our UK counterparts, for those working in Europe or Asia. A consistent message is just that departments don't have enough people. This is particularly bad in the US with the erosion of tenure and some of those long-term positions. But one of the things that I like about this next book is it's called Come Up for Air: How Teams Can Leverage Systems and Tools to Stop Drowning in Work. I like how this takes advantage of what is actually there. So in some ways, yes, it's disappointing to say, well, I'll use my department as an example. My particular department could certainly benefit from 2 more faculty to cover some of our classes. As a result, because we don't have those 2 faculty, we're overworked. We all carry more than we need to in teaching and service and all that. And I like this particular book because it offers some practical strategies to make it better right now. I have read some excerpts from this book, but I've always wanted to read the whole thing. So this is one that will be on my list. And if you're somebody that's a department chair or faculty developer and you're kind of struggling with resources and trying to figure out how is something getting covered without you having to be the person that does it all, I think this could be useful. Also, I know we have lots of writing program administrators and writing center directors listening to this particular podcast. And so I think this could be a really useful book to look at how to make some of those systems work a little bit better. Because one of the challenges, I think, of being in those roles, and I've held both of those roles over the course of my career, is that you're responsible not just for your own writing, but everybody else's writing in the university. And for faculty developers, this would be true if you're in charge of faculty writing. So this would be one about management that I think might be useful. And I like it because it does have specific nuts and bolts strategies to make things a little bit better right now. So using the resources that you have. So that's number 3, I believe. I also want to read, this is number 4, or maybe it's possibly 5, I lost track of this podcast, How to Write Like a Writer. And this one, there's actually several books that have been written by Thomas Foster, who's the author of this one. There's one about how to read like a literature professor that I don't teach literature, but I know that many of my colleagues that have taught literature really like it for using it with graduate students. But How to Write Like a Writer, a sharp and subversive guide to ignoring inhibitions, inviting inspiration, and finding your true voice. It looks like a very appealing read because, again, this is a book much like Jolie Jensen's Write No Matter What, which I know I've reviewed on a previous podcast. This is also a book where you can just open it up to the table of contents, find out what your issue is, go to the chapter that talks about that issue, use the advice, and then move on. So one of my favorite things about Jensen's book, again, I'll link to that one in the podcast. It's called Write No Matter What. But one of my favorite things about hers is that if you say you're writing along, you're having some kind of major issue, you could stop, pick up her book, find the problem, and most of the problems are in there, read about what to do, and it's short. It's like a 1 to 2 page description about some ideas to try, and then go and try those and get back to writing. So I'm a big fan of books that allow a writer to grab them as needed, find out a solution, and then keep going. Because sometimes, reading an entire book, is not going to be the way to solve your problem. You need to keep writing because you only have, 8 to 10 hours of writing a week or whatever you planned for. So this is one that I would recommend. As with all of our reading suggestions, I will link all of these in the show notes. And book number 5, so I did indeed do 4. This is number 5, is Refining Your Academic Writing. This one is by Pat Thompson. And this one I was really interested in because I've been hunting for a long time for an academic book about revision in academic writing that looks like it could be useful with graduate students or even faculty. But this one really seems to have that. And I think even in maybe with advanced undergraduates, it could work here as well. But one of the things I like is the emphasis there is that it's on writing once at least one draft of writing is completed. So I think that's useful because many of these books focus on just getting that first draft completed, or some of them might throw in a chapter on revision, but revision isn't necessarily the focus. In this case, in this book on refining academic writing, that would be the focus, is on revision. So I know this is one that I'm going to look at, and this will probably be the last book I look at in the summer because I know I'm going to want to use it with my master's students who are working on thesis projects. I have many of them that are doing some thesis research and literature review writing over the summer, and they'll get into the fall wanting to complete those thesis projects by the end of the fall semester. So I know for me that this book, reading it right before the beginning of the fall semester, would be kind of the perfect time to talk to those students about revision and apply some of those practices. So these are going to be the 5 books that I'm looking at this summer. I mentioned that I will be doing some other fun kinds of academic reading, but if people have other suggestions for books on academic reading I should check out, anything like 2020 or later tends to be something that I probably haven't seen or heard about before. But if you want to share some of those on Twitter, we'd love to hear about that. Also, I want to steer you to our multiple events that are going on Eventbrite right now. If you Google Eventbrite and Defend and Publish and Lead, you can find several of our series going on, including an upcoming series that you can do at any point on turning conference slides or conference poster into an article. So this tends to be a really popular choice for folks that want to get out a publication and they know they've got some conference slides lying around. It's a self-guided video tour that shows you step-by-step how to actually turn your slides into an article. And as a caveat, or well, I don't want to call it a caveat, as a bonus, the videos are not very long. So there are 5 of them, but they're pretty short. And so I was working with somebody on this to create these videos, and we looked at how much time it would take you to do this. And it depends on how much writing needs to be done or how much you need to look up after completing a conference presentation to round out that material. But in terms of actually executing tasks each day, if you wanted to try to do this over the course of 5 days, like watching a video, applying the strategies, watching a video, applying the strategies, I can't guarantee you will have a very long full draft, but you will have a decently developed full draft that then you can go and revise. You can look up the things you need to look up. You can see the spots that you need to expand on, but your content won't be just existing in slides or a poster anymore. So if you're interested in checking that out again, that's at Eventbrite at Defend, Publish, and Lead. And you can also check the link in our show notes to it. Happy writing.